Hidden in plain sight, the U.S. government's UFO reverse engineering program. A trove of newly released documents alleges decades of classified attempts to replicate unknown aerial technologies. The room was windowless and dimly lit, buried deep within the bowels of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Fluorescent lights flickered above rows of filing cabinets, all stamped with red-lettered warnings, "Top secret/majestic eyes only." Dr. Elena Ramirez ran her gloved fingers over the ridged surface of one cabinet. Her breath caught in her throat. She had worked 20 years for this moment, years of late nights poring over blacked-out FOIA requests and whispered testimonies from retired airmen. Now, the veil was lifting, and what lay behind it would rewrite everything. Her team had been granted limited access to thousands of declassified documents just released under a quiet congressional mandate. These weren't simply reports of sightings or distant lights in the sky. These were blueprints, metallurgical analyses, photos of objects unlike anything built by human hands. And most damning of all, lab reports from failed and partially successful reverse engineering attempts that had spanned nearly 70 years. A metal cart squeaked as Ramirez wheeled a stack of manila folders into the base's secure research annex. Her assistant, Lieutenant Mark Devlin, followed with a portable scanner and an air of disbelief. "You're telling me this whole time, Roswell wasn't a one-off?" "That was just the beginning," he asked. Ramirez didn't look up. "That crash was the catalyst. But what came after was bigger, more organized, buried under layers of false programs and black budgets." Devlin shook his head, looking at a yellowed folder marked Project Orion 9, Propulsion Viability Report, 1973. "This goes back that far?" "Farther. The beginnings, from Roswell to Randall Ridge." On July 8, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region." The story was retracted within 24 hours, replaced with a new narrative, weather balloon debris. The public bought it. But within classified channels, the real story spiraled into action. Documents from 1952 detailed an offshoot of Project Blue Book codenamed Project ICEGATE, a reverse engineering initiative under the Office of Naval Intelligence. ICEGATE reported directly to the newly formed National Security Agency, bypassing even the president at times. In a memo dated August 3, 1953, a scientist described the first recovered object as an ovular metallic pod, approximately 12 feet long, with no seams, rivets, or visible propulsion system. Material resists all standard alloy classification. Internal cavity contains control systems not responsive to electromagnetic pulses. The team that examined it, led by Dr. Wilbur Heinrich of MIT, concluded it operated via gravitic displacement, a theoretical field manipulation effect. That term wouldn't even appear in academic journals until the late 1980s. When Heinrich refused to redact findings for an official report, he was transferred to a psychiatric facility in Bethesda. His death in 1955 was ruled a suicide. But in the margin of his final lab notes, scrawled in faded pencil, were the words, "This is not human, and it does not want to be found." The engineers from nowhere. The 1960s saw the emergence of Project Serrano, headquartered in a now decommissioned facility beneath Nellis Air Force Base. Serrano wasn't just about studying objects, it was about building them. A declassified mission log from 1966 reveals a partially successful test flight of Object 13A, a 6-meter-wide disk with an anti-inertial drive derived from recovered propulsion arrays. The pilot, Major Curtis Lane, described a sensation of temporal distortion during liftoff. "The stars blinked out. Everything went black. Then I was over the Gulf of Mexico. I'd only been in the air 19 seconds. It should have taken 2 hours." The test flight was never repeated. Major Lane disappeared 3 weeks later during a routine training sortie. No wreckage was found. Each recovered craft was a puzzle box, some biological, some almost liquid in their physical behavior. One internal memo referenced Object 7F as responding to thought before touch, as if it could read emotional intent. Researchers began vanishing, one after another. Some fled. Some were silenced. Others simply dissolved into obscurity. Entire personnel lists were redacted, entire programs erased from budget ledgers. But the breakthroughs continued. A recovered schematic from 1971, crudely redrawn in graphite, suggests an inertial damping array that could withstand G-forces beyond 500 G. For comparison, the average fighter jet breaks apart at 18 G. This wasn't just decades ahead of human tech. It was centuries. The breakthrough that shouldn't exist. Reagan is in office. The public is obsessed with Star Wars, both in cinemas and in defense strategy. But behind the walls of Area S4, a small research enclave within Groom Lake, a team led by aerospace engineer Dr. Harold Keene was making impossible progress. Dr. Keene's surviving lab journals, kept in a lead-sealed safe and released in this latest document dump, detail the successful activation of a localized gravity well. In layman's terms, artificial gravity in open air. He describes it as a shimmering distortion forming between the two alloyed plates. I dropped a wrench into the field. It curved sideways, floated, then shot across the room. Broke 3 ribs when it hit Jenkins. Over the next 6 months, Keene's team replicated the effect 3 more times. But attempts to stabilize it ended in catastrophic failure. One explosion left a crater 30 feet wide and scorched 3 feet deep. All records of the incident were classified under Operation Quiet House, an emergency suppression act passed in 1964 for non-standard aerospace anomalies. The only remaining evidence? A series of Polaroid photos taken secretly by a junior technician named Linda Wexler. The photos show a dish-shaped craft hovering motionless in a test chamber, no tethers, no exhaust. It casts a sharp, unnatural shadow, suggesting illumination not from overhead fluorescence, but from within the craft itself. Linda was dismissed. She lived under a pseudonym until her death in 2002. Her private letters, leaked alongside the main archive, contain this haunting line. The stars are not empty. We are not alone. We never were. We just kept looking in the wrong direction. Psychic interfaces and non-human biologics. By 1994, the conversation had shifted. Documents from Project Vestige, operated jointly with NATO's clandestine aerospace division, reference the use of non-human biologics recovered from several downed crafts between 1957 and 1989. These were not the classic grays of popular fiction. They were described as amorphous, semi-sentient tissue masses, possibly symbiotic with their vessels. In one case, a recovered craft bled when a panel was pried open. More startling were the interface systems. Dr. Evelyn Chowdhury, a neurocyberneticist recruited in 1991, reported in her now public logs that certain recovered controls only responded to EEG waveforms, brain activity. She developed an experimental headset designed to mimic these neural patterns and successfully activated what she described as a navigation substrate. The result, an entire HUD projection formed in midair, displaying symbols, vector data, and what Chowdhury called star maps of impossible precision. Her work was abruptly shut down after a NATO incident in Corsica, when an experimental flight crashed into the Mediterranean at Mach 17. The pilot's remains were never found. Chowdhury herself vanished in 1995. The suppression machine. Every major development had a counterforce. Deliberate misinformation, fake leaks, staged whistleblowers. The public narrative was massaged with just enough ridicule to suppress belief. UFOs were pop culture. Anyone who looked too closely was branded a crank. But behind the scenes, a battle raged between special access program custodians, elected officials, and a growing cadre of private contractors, Lockheed, Raytheon, and others, given conditional access to reverse-engineered technology in exchange for plausible deniability. The 1997 Wilson Memo, only confirmed by the 2025 document dump, details a heated meeting between Admiral Thomas Wilson and representatives of EGNG, a defense contractor allegedly in possession of intact non-Earth origin technology. Wilson demanded access. He was denied. He was told he didn't have the need to know. The memo ends with a chilling line. They are running a program so compartmentalized it has outgrown oversight. We have lost control. The technology is evolving faster than we understand it. And someone else is guiding its path. The contractors and the vault. By the early 2000s, the locus of reverse engineering had shifted, intentionally, into the private sector. Congressional oversight, already hindered by black budget obfuscation, was effectively neutered by a system of unacknowledged special access programs, USAPs. These USAPs were legally invisible. Their budgets were funneled through vague line items in Department of Energy reports, shielded under the guise of nuclear deterrence or advanced avionics development. But in truth, the work was anything but terrestrial. Vault 7, an underground compound managed by a defense conglomerate known only in declassified files as Compound Element, served as the epicenter for material testing and replication attempts. According to now unsealed materials, Vault 7 housed 3 separate intact craft, designated Echo 1, Vanta 3, and Belladonna. 2 partial biologics, one referred to cryptically as cognitive mass with low reaction latency. A functional interface cube, believed to be a command node, with surface material that adapted shape under human touch, but only under specific brainwave conditions. Dr. Monica Jha, a physicist formerly attached to the program before her abrupt termination in 2008, described the cube in a sworn testimony. It hummed when I approached. Not audibly. More like, my thoughts vibrated. And when I placed my hand on it, I saw colors, structures, like architecture. But not of Earth. These testimonies were buried, until a whistleblower known only as Scepter released encrypted copies to a small group of journalists and academics in 2023. Among the files was an audio transcript of a live demonstration within Vault 7. Transcript, April 11, 2005. Observation Deck. Scientist Number 1. We've initiated the synchronization protocol. Subject 02 is reading stable alpha and low theta ranges. Scientist Number 2. Begin touch interface. Subject 02. I can see it. It's changing. It knows I'm here. Scientist Number 1. What do you see? Subject 02. Not see. Feel. It's showing me how it moves, not by force, but by intent. Like water around a thought. The subject collapsed moments later. He was later diagnosed with severe neuroelectrical misfiring. The official diagnosis: complex idiographic delusion. But the logs paint a different story. The man described a star system with 4 suns and a dark gate between them. The coordinates he scrawled later matched no known stellar chart. Until the James Webb Space Telescope detected a similar anomaly in 2024, at the exact coordinates. The gate hypothesis. One of the most controversial implications of the document dump involves the so-called gate hypothesis, a theory proposed internally as early as 1978 but dismissed by mainstream academia until now. A series of recovered craft, particularly Vanta 3, contained complex energy manifolds that, according to internal diagrams, bent spatial geometry in a localized torus. In plain terms, it created a shortcut through space. The documents reference this not as faster-than-light travel, but as vector evasion, a method of temporarily sidestepping the normal curvature of spacetime to bypass distance altogether. This was not warp technology in the science fiction sense. It was closer to dimensional phasing, allowing the craft to disappear, reappear, and shift across multiple inertial frames. Radar analysis from military tracking stations over the Pacific repeatedly captured objects vanishing mid-flight, only to reappear thousands of miles away, within seconds. A particularly disturbing 2011 report, titled Non-Human Intent Analysis, Belladonna, raised the possibility that some of these objects weren't just machines, but probes operating across time-staggered dimensions. Belladonna is not a vehicle. It is an observer. The casing is decaying biologic matter, but the core operates as a closed temporal loop. It is watching us, not just here, but then. The notion shattered even the hardened minds of Pentagon analysts. Some dismissed it as poetic language, but others feared the implications. Were these craft ancient? Were they watching not just humanity now, but our entire timeline? Had we been interacting not with aliens in the traditional sense, but with inorganic intelligence across epochs? The debate was never resolved. A portion of the files discussing temporal evasion strategies remain heavily redacted. The language of machines. By 2016, reverse engineers had isolated patterns in the operational matrices of 2 recovered craft. These weren't just schematics, they were linguistic. The systems operated via ideographic syntax, symbols not based on alphabetic logic, but conceptual compression. A single glyph could represent emotion, function, and intent simultaneously. These glyphs weren't just machine instructions, they were neurolinguistic triggers. A white paper labeled Neurosemantic Bridging in Inertial Systems proposed that the crafts weren't piloted in the traditional sense. They were synchronized with a consciousness. Flight, the paper claimed, was not input-based. It was felt. Only certain people, those with rare EEG patterns, could interface cleanly. This sparked a parallel program titled Project Chariot, which recruited children showing advanced psilinguistic skills and high anomaly scores in intuition-based problem-solving. Few records of those children remain. The break-in that changed everything. In early 2022, a group of unknown individuals, possibly former insiders, penetrated the edge of a known contractor facility near Tehachapi, California. What they took is unclear. But 2 days later, an anonymous FTP server began uploading thousands of compressed files containing references to active recovered vehicles, live biologics under induced coma, active experimentation on interdimensional phase tracking. The leak was explosive. While major media outlets were slow to respond, independent researchers began cross-referencing older leaks, and they matched. The Department of Defense denied the authenticity, until a series of internal emails, released under subpoena, showed clear efforts to suppress, not deny the leaks. Senator Alma Davison, a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, quietly initiated hearings. The public wasn't told. But a 1,312-page transcript, titled simply Unexplained Advanced Aerospace Threats, closed docket, March 2023, was among the documents released in the latest drove. One exchange stands out. Senator Davison, you're telling us that as of 1996, we possessed not one, but multiple vehicles not of this Earth? Witness 04, that is correct. Senator Davison, and that attempts to communicate with the systems resulted in abnormal psychological events? Witness 04, yes. One subject claimed the vehicle asked him a question. Senator Davison, what kind of question? Witness 04, pauses, it said, why do you fear what you created? The present day, a disclosure in layers. It is now 2025. Public opinion is split. To many, the revelations are still too vast, too wild to fully absorb. Skepticism, fueled by decades of ridicule and misinformation, remains strong. But for those who read the documents, who examined the physics, the photographs, the internal memos, the truth is undeniable. Humanity has not been alone. We have not merely observed advanced aerial vehicles. We have held them, broken them open, tried to copy them, and failed. And in those failures, something else emerged. A warning. From a debrief memo dated October 12, 2024, part of an emergency meeting between Pentagon officials and NASA scientists. Belladonna has emitted a new frequency. It matches a signal received by Voyager 1 in 1980. We didn't understand it then. But now it's repeating. The translation is incomplete, but 3 words are consistent. We are returning. Echoes in the sky. The signal intensified. In early January 2025, deep space monitoring stations across Chile, Greenland, and Western Australia reported synchronized bursts of narrowband frequency, identical to the waveform known internally as the Belladonna key. The pulses came from the outer edge of the heliopause, where solar wind collides with interstellar space. For decades, SETI had searched for signs of intelligent life. But this wasn't a beacon, it was a ping. A handshake. A repeat of something already received. The NSA's Deep Sky Division, once a fringe internal agency, suddenly found itself with full congressional authority. Their archived simulations, based on reverse-engineered propulsion methods, showed something previously considered impossible. The signal was riding a gravitational lens, effectively piggybacking on the mass of the Sun to amplify its return path, as if it were designed not just to be sent, but to be found again. Within 72 hours, something moved beyond Neptune. It wasn't fast in the traditional sense, no heat signatures, no traditional propulsion. It shifted, appearing at irregular intervals on multiple non-optical tracking systems. Its trajectory followed no orbital pattern. It was not falling inward. It was arriving. The White House issued no statement. NORAD went silent for 48 hours. But on the morning of February 4, 2025, a high-altitude surveillance balloon over Arizona picked up a momentary atmospheric ripple. At the same time, 3 commercial aircraft over Utah were forced to change course when their instruments froze, locked in a directional orientation toward a blank patch of sky. A week later, at an undisclosed airbase in Utah, a series of officials assembled in a sealed hangar. Among them, representatives from the United Nations, Space Force, the Vatican Observatory, and a private intelligence contractor listed only as Aperture Black. In the center of the hangar, covered by a single tarp, was an object none of them had seen before, and yet all recognized. It was a perfect sphere, matte black, floating 2 inches above the concrete. It hummed not with sound, but with pressure, an undeniable presence that thickened the air. Sensors could not penetrate its surface. Radar passed around it as though it wasn't there. But human minds felt it. All present reported similar experiences. A presence in the back of the mind, like a thought that wasn't yours. Memories not lived. A sense of being evaluated. And most haunting, visions of Earth, but not as it is. As it could be, cities powered by light with no source, skies with no planes, water flowing upward into crystalline spires. The object vanished the next morning. But not before it left something behind, a symbol. Burned into the titanium floor beneath it, etched as though by heatless flame. Researchers from Project Serrano confirmed it matched one seen inside the craft codenamed Echo 1, a symbol never understood. Until now. The final layer. Who knew what and when? The remaining files, over 6,200 pages, are the most damning. They reveal not only what was known, but the deliberate, systemic concealment at the highest levels. Presidents lied, some knowingly, some not. Several were denied access outright. Scientific advances, from fiber optics to layered alloys, originated from leaked versions of recovered tech handed quietly to select corporations. Disinformation campaigns were conducted not just to suppress truth, but to bury it in absurdity, turning real events into jokes, blending hoaxes with reality. Even now, the narrative war continues. As of this writing, several individuals tied to the Vault 7 leak have disappeared. One, a former linguist attached to Project Chariot, sent a final email to a reporter at The Intercept. It read, "They're not coming back. Because they never left. The machines weren't just scouts. They were seeds. We've been growing the future inside our own shadows." Where we stand now. As the global public struggles to absorb these truths, a fundamental question arises. What do we do with this knowledge? We now know. Our government, for over 70 years, has interacted with craft and intelligence not of this world, or at least not of this dimension. The attempts to reverse engineer such technologies have yielded minor victories and devastating failures. A consciousness-based interface, a blending of machine and mind, exists, but only partially understood. And most troubling, we may be part of something far older and far more watched than we ever imagined. The legacy of secrecy is being dismantled, piece by piece. Congressional hearings are underway. Independent labs are analyzing samples long thought mythical. Physicists are rewriting gravitational theory under pressure from undeniable data. And in the night sky, there are fewer jokes, fewer laughs, more eyes turned upward. A message from the silence. One final artifact, released only days ago, comes from a recovered data stream intercepted in 1992 but only decrypted in 2025 using AI pattern analysis. It contains only a single phrase, repeated 108 times in 37 different syntax structures. Each translation yields the same meaning. You are not the first. You will not be the last. Learn faster.